Is Cyberpunk 2.0 finally the game that it should have been at release? And is it now worthy of the company that brought us the masterpiece that is The Witcher 3? And if so, why? Well, the answer to the first question is easy. Yes. Cyberpunk 2.0 is absolutely brilliant. I mean, I've always loved Cyberpunk 2077, but I did acknowledge it had a whole laundry list of flaws, and that doesn't include all the performance issues it had on consoles. I've made a video where I talked about the many things that I didn't quite like about it, and what I can tell you is, as of 2.0, more or less all of those problems have gone. But then, to be honest with you, many of them had disappeared prior to patch 2.0. Things like the map. The dynamic map that they've added to the game fixed one of the major issues I had with the game, which was it presented a very, very poor first impression. The map is now a lot easier to read, it's a lot less cluttered, and more importantly, it tends to lead you to the storied content rather than the filler content that it was tending to lead you to at release. Basically now the game feels more like an RPG and less like a Ubisoft spamathon. And there were many other things that were added prior to patch 2.0 that really did help reduce some of the rough edges the game had. Remove some of the frustrations. It added things like the ability to reject a phone call. A small thing, and yet an important thing. But patch 2.0, well, that seemed to try and add something to the game rather than just make it more bearable. It tried to add things that were fun, at the same time as reducing things that were a bit grindy and boring. A good example of that is the character build system. It's still got the 5 stats, but instead of having 2 or 3 skills per stat, you've got 1 skill per stat. It's much simpler, and none of those skills are soft capped to the stat, so you don't have to start worrying about wasting experience if you temporarily hit a stat cap while leveling up. You just play the game the way you want to play it, use whichever tools you want to use, and you will get better at that particular skill without all the micromanaging. And even within the stat, instead of having 1 page of perks for each of the skills, so for reflexes it would have been 3 pages, you now have 1. Now this is an oversimplification, isn't it? No. No, it's not. Well, not really. It's a simplification, it's a streamlining, and I know people get a little freaked out by those terms, but it is definitely not an oversimplification. In fact, the new character build system seems to add lots of new cool things. Every time I level up and I get a perk, I feel like I'm gaining maybe a new way to play. All of a sudden I can block bullets with my sword. Suddenly I can do air dashes. All of the perks feel a lot more meaningful than they did in the previous game, in 1.0, where, to be honest, you would often feel like your perks were just adding a little bit of damage or a little bit of mitigation. Everything was like small bonuses, whereas with the new system, very often you will unlock things that will completely change the way you play. And that's within one particular playstyle. My Netrunner went through quite a few changes, trying a lot of new tools, because of course there are some new Netrunner tools, including monowire and smart weapons. You will, if you're doing a pistol build, you will go through stages where the pistol has, a slightly different way of playing if you want to get the most out of it. And it generally makes the game feel much more interesting and much more fun. Conversely, they've made Cyberware a little more complicated. Cyberware now provides most of your armor through various different items, but you also have something called Cyberware capacity, which limits how much cyberware you can have. Now, this is a level 60 character, and I've pretty much maxed out, but when you start out, you really have to carefully choose which bits of cyberware you have, because you have a limit. And the Cyberware now does a lot more. There are a lot more little boosts and bonuses, but very often you'll install a piece of Cyberware that will just, again, change the way you play just a little, but enough to be interesting. In fact, what I would say with Cyberware now is it very much feels like part of the character build system rather than part of the equipment system. You know, with your character build system and your Cyberware, you'll be changing these things at key moments. These are major decisions that you will make as you decide what playstyle you want. But if at a certain point you decide to completely change your Cyberware, even with the exact same character build, you can change the way you play. I mean, this is a sword build. Currently he's using a Berserk. But you switch a few of these mods up, change it to a Sandervistan, and all of a sudden my playstyle changes quite radically. But the inventory system as well is much better because it is now a lot simpler. And by that I mean, when you look at weapons, there's no level anymore. They've got rid of leveled items, which, I mean, I hated those. I couldn't stand having a pistol that was almost identical to the pistol I was currently using, but I couldn't pull the trigger on it, apparently, because I wasn't skilled enough. It never made sense, and it was always kind of complicated because you ended up with 3 or 4 versions of the same pistol, of your favourite pistol, that you were waiting to use when you got to the right level. Now they just have the tiered system. So you have tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there are various grades between them as well with the pluses. And if you find a favourite weapon, you'll basically be waiting to find the next tier. It's a little simpler, it's a little less micromanagey, and it makes way more sense to me as well. The clothing now gives very little stats or armor. There are some pieces that do give stats and do give armor, but they're almost negligible compared to your Cyberware. So now you basically dress the way you want to dress, and you don't have to use the weird outfit magic wardrobe system. You can change the way you look constantly. Go into a shop, find a new set of glasses, find a new jacket, switch to it. You don't have to think about anything other than how I look in the instant. When you're thinking about effectiveness, functionality, you're thinking character and Cyberware. When you're thinking, how much damage I do or whatever, you just pick whichever the best weapon is or whichever your favourite weapon is. And you can do that usually a little quicker because of the lack of the level system. And when you want to look cool, you just think about looking cool. The crafting system has been completely overhauled. Now, I will accept the accusation that it's been oversimplified, because it kind of has. In fact, it's been utterly stripped down. It's no longer linked to your character. Although when you craft, you will work your engineer skill. You really don't need to invest in crafting to actually do any crafting. But there's also a lot less reason to do crafting. Really, you'll be upgrading your iconics and you'll be crafting a few things, maybe. But all in all, crafting's become very much a bit of a side issue. It's not that important. But honestly, I mean, I know some people are going to miss it. There are going to be 1 or 2 people who really loved the whole crafting thing. But honestly, I think for most people, you're going to enjoy this much more because crafting is now... Well, crafting used to be unbelievably grindy. It used to be disgustingly, horribly grindy. It was tons of micromanaging, but you had to sort of do it if you wanted tier 5 stuff, if you wanted the best weapons, and it was kind of annoying. And honestly, once you'd done it on one build, it was so old. Now, you can have your tier 5 stuff, you can have your proper, well upgraded gear without investing God knows how many hours crafting 350 green bloody sniper rifles or whatever it was you were doing to get your crafting up. The gadget and the medical equipment, they've been tweaked a little bit. They're now more like the thrown weapons in that you don't have to have a backpack filled with grenades to use them. You just choose your grenade and I think you can throw 2 of them and then you have to wait for a cooldown while your grenades regenerate. The same is true of your medical items. I've got mixed feelings on that because it's kind of like the throwing knife. It's a little bit magic, and, you know, when you say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. But the reason I got mixed opinions on it is, like the throwing knife, honestly, you forget it very, very quickly, and it now works so much better. It's more balanced because you can't just spam 3,000 grenades if you've happened to craft them, or 3,000 meds. You've now got to actually, you know, you can take 1 or 2 meds in an emergency, but now you're waiting for a few seconds. So you've got to play smarter, you've got to play better. But also, you don't have to keep micromanaging those things. It's kind of like with the throwing knife, the way they changed it to have the regeneration, the cooldown time. It just made the throwing knife playing style actually viable, and I gotta say, a lot of fun. I've done a 2.0 knife throwing playthrough, and I've really enjoyed that too. So these are changes that, you know, I do have mixed feelings on, but at the same time, honestly, I do approve of them, purely because, again, I find myself focusing on having fun playing the game rather than on the micromanaging. And honestly, that's pretty much what I would describe Cyberpunk 2.0 as. It's just a much more fun and a lot less grindy version of Cyberpunk 2077. You see, the thing is, Cyberpunk 2.0, as I'm calling it, is essentially the same game as it was at 1.0. It's got the same quests, it's got the same atmosphere, it's got the same amazing look to an amazing city. It's just more fun to play now. I mean, they've ironed out a lot of the things that were annoying and got rid of those, but they've also added a ton of stuff that's kind of cool. Riding the metro, it serves no purpose other than it's cool, and I love it. You know, it really is worth doing at least once, just so you can see the city from that angle. It's amazing, and they just seem to have added tons of things like that. But other than that, it's the same game. It's the same game that I really love playing. I mean, I so love driving around Night City. Oh, cars. There are more cars now. Cars are a little easier to get. I say easier to get. You buy them from the computer. You don't have to go out to the middle of nowhere and find that particular car. You might miss that. I kind of miss that in a little bit of in one way. But honestly, just loads of new cars. And because the economy seems a little different, it seems a little easier to make money. And at the same time, by the way, if you think, oh, well, isn't that going to make me overpowered? No, because again, a lot of your power is coming from your cyberware, and it doesn't matter how much money you've got, your cyberware is limited by your cyberware capacity, i.e. your level. So you'll have quite a bit of spare money. So you can buy several cars, and God, do I love driving around Night City in my car. I absolutely adore it. And again, it's such a brilliant story with so many cool moments, so much atmosphere. And I've not even touched upon Phantom Liberty yet. I'm going to save that for a different video. Just the base 2.0 game, it's even more fun than it ever was to play. So if you've been on the fence about this game, if you've seen, you know, reviews of it and thought, people were annoyed by it, is it worth playing under 2.0? Yes. If you've played it, but you thought, all right, I'm done. I've played it 3 or 4 times. I think I'm done. Go back, try it again. Trust me. Some of these builds are insane fun. I'm doing a Silent Pistol playthrough now. But like Blades playthrough was so much fun. Throwing knives, so much fun. Netrunner is a lot of fun now. It really, honestly, they've made Netrunner very, very versatile, extremely versatile, and a ton of fun. You can play in so many different ways, and that's what Cyberpunk 2.0 is to me. A lot of fun now. I mean, it always was fun, but now it's just tons and tons of fun. I'm having a great time with a sort of stealth pistol build at the moment, but I'm going to try every build you can possibly think of. And at its core, it is still the same incredible story the same incredible experience of Night City, the atmosphere, the visuals, the music, and the characters that you've grown to love. It's just now that the game, the story, that amazing emotional experience is surrounded by a game that's just an absolute joy to play.
You don't believe in no fate.